Okay, let's put on the glasses for this. I'm just kidding. Welcome back to another part of our series on mother culture. We are going to be talking about the 4 books that I think you should read right now as a common mom. Hello and welcome back to The Commonplace. My name is Autumn and I will be your library curator today because we are back with another video for our Mother Culture series, which I just started. It's a new thing, but I'm basically working through the books in my library, organizing them by a couple books I think you should read for this, or if you're interested in this idea, start here. And we're just gonna keep going because, as we know, how do people grow? What feeds the mind? It's living ideas. And so, blending together, building an atmosphere in your home in which you practice the discipline or habit of reading living ideas is how you do mother culture. And so today we're gonna talk about 4 books that I think all common moms should read as soon as they can because they will help you get the right sort of mental vision for the home and what you are doing in it. So I guess this could also be like the 4 books for homemakers in some sense, but I want to extend it to motherhood. I think I'm going to extend it to motherhood. So I'm going to start with a book that I don't think has been on any list for moms to read, at least not since the 80s when it was written. This is Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. If you've not read this, I highly recommend that you do. I read it in college, so about 10 years ago, and even then I thought, wow, this is so prophetic for our time and place. And it was written in the 80s, but here we are in the 2020s, and it is still prophetic. So in this book, Neil Postman is particularly talking about the media of television, that sort of medium. However, everything that he says is true today for what we have with the larger internet, social media, even the way we use Netflix and Amazon Prime and things like that. And the one thing that I love and want to just really pull out from the book is Postman's idea of the corrosive effects of electronic media on a world. So of course he starts back with print books, print journalism, print religious study, different things like that, and talks about how they form you, how your imagination comes to play, how your reasoning comes to play. And then he noticed that with television came the onslaught of entertaining media. All of a sudden your news needs to be entertaining in order to keep your attention. And entertaining could mean really fun and playful, or it could mean absolute worst narrative ever, because that'll keep you watching it as well. And so as he works through what happens when that happens to the rest of our public discourse, what happens when we take that approach of entertaining small media bite-sized ideas and we apply it to education, to religion, to politics, what happens to a society? Well, I can tell you it's not very good. And now, of course, we have cell phones in our back pockets, tiny little computers that we can whip out at any point, a constant stream of people's best lives ever, whatever it is on social media coming at us, and all of life essentially operates like show business. All of media life operates like show business. And so what does that do to us? And that, as a mother, as one who does have to answer to God for how we form our children, how we build into our children's lives, what kind of culture we build in our homes, this will give you a very different mental picture than most of the conversations around how Christians should use social media. Within the larger Christian conversation about how Christians ought to be on social media or how they should use social media, a lot of it centers around how can we redeem this for Christ, or how can we use this to share Christ. And I think there are times and places for that conversation, but I also think it's very important to understand how these media came about, what the intention was, and what they do to us on an embodied level. What do they do to the way our brains work, the way our bodies work, the way we understand entertainment versus reality versus truth versus fact. And this will kind of help you pull back into more of a pre-modern mind without being explicitly trying to do that. So highly recommend as we are raising children in the digital age. And then continuing that trend of how do we live as people who move at an image bearer pace in a very fast world, focused on the really good things, both the uncommon and the common versions of them in life, as opposed to the counterfeit versions of things, which this is the thing I talk about on Patreon. Hey, come join us, $7 a month. We'd love to have you, links below. And with that, I give you Supper of the Lamb by Father Capon. I love this book. This is one of the books that I actually use as a commonplace book itself. Like, I don't pull quotes from this kind of book because it's so good. I just put everything in this book. This is the commonplace book for this book because it's so good. And in it, it's a cookbook. So he's a talented chef. He's an Episcopal priest, and he writes it as it's a cookbook. But he moves through the idea of ordinary, good, common cooking versus really exquisite, uncommon feast type cooking. And as he does that, he says a lot of things about life, a lot of things about how we move in God's world. Is God's world an invitation into his love? Is it an invitation into his gifts of kindness? Or is it just this material world we can snub aside? Is it just this material world that we can use and manipulate and master? And he does all of it while actually giving you recipes and talking about what kind of knives you should have in your kitchen and different things like that. And what I love is that he is trying to challenge against the pre-packaged consumeristic way of the modern world. If you are someone who likes writers like Madeleine L'Engle or C.S. Lewis, you will love this book. It's like C.S. Lewis and Wendell Berry had a book baby. It's witty, it's insightful. He will talk about the ways we blaspheme God and the ways we respond to food and the ways we respond to the material world. He will have you looking around and seeing the whole world in a slightly more enchanting way, and the things that you do as a mother within your home as acts of love that have power to actually transform the people around your table. And so while yes, it is a cookbook, the last book was about, you know, the change in media, neither of these seem like, oh, these are books for moms. They 100% are books for mom, because when you change a mom, when you inspire a mom, you change a home, which changes a neighborhood, which changes a culture. Don't forget it. The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. Okay, next book is Hannah Coulter. Speaking of Wendell Berry, I really do have a type. I have a book type, clearly. So Hannah Coulter, one of my favorite books. If you don't know Wendell Berry, how? But also, if you do know Wendell Berry, then you know his fiction all takes place in the same town. So place is very important to Wendell Berry. It's important in his nonfiction writing. If you read his essays, if you read his poetry, it comes out all the time. But within his books, places themselves are characters. And so in this book, I don't want to give too much away, but it's a very slow-paced book about a woman who is living in an agricultural community at a time in which the world is starting to shift in modernity. People are leaving the farms, they're going to the cities, they're abandoning the old ways, they want to go bigger and better. The US government at that time legitimately was encouraging farms to grow as much as they could, use pesticides, do all the things so that we have better, bigger, busier crops so we can make more money. And towns like Wendell Berry's fictional town here, and the town he actually grew up in, which this is based on, completely fall apart. And we know that if you drive through more rural areas in the US, you can see the impact of that. And so with this book, part of what I loved about it is that it traces Hannah's life, and it moves slowly like the actual pace of life. It's not some crazy stories of ups and downs. There are deep pains in this book and deep and high joys, I guess you could say. But you watch a woman work through the difficulties of life, trying to handle them with grace, trying to love the people around her, trying to love the place that she is rooted in, and really dig those roots in deeper so that she can have an impact. And yet the brokenness is there. But if you've not read Berry, the way he talks about marriage, even the way he's able to talk about a mother nursing her infant in this book, you kind of read it and you're like, how did a man write this? You are a little confused about how he was able to do that, because it's so beautiful and it's such a gift to any woman reading it. And I like that it doesn't tie everything up with a nice bow at the end or at any point in the story, because that's also not the reality of motherhood. But in motherhood, when we are thinking about mother culture and we're thinking about giving ourselves ideas that inspire us towards what we want to be, we want to look for characters like Hannah, who stay faithful and who continue to do daily labors as acts of love to the people who may not see them as that around her, and yet she continues on. And then at the end of her life, she is able to look back and see the thread of grace in the middle of a lot of brokenness, which is the reality of loving people and building a home on this side of eternity. So this is a very encouraging book, but I did want to say from the start, it's slow. If you go in thinking it's gonna be action-packed, you will find that is not Berry, but Berry is very good. Okay, and then my last one, who honestly fits right in with Wendell Berry and with Father Capon and Madeleine L'Engle and C.S. Lewis and all the people that I like, is right here, Hallowed Be This House by Thomas Howard. So I'm actually currently almost finished. I'm in my first read of this book. It was gifted to me by a friend, and I've loved it. I've loved the way it's structured. He basically moves through each room in your house and talks about how God's grace awaits you there. And how can you think of it? How can you think of the front door? How can you think about what it separates from the inside and how it spills out to the outside? What happens in the kitchen? What happens in the bedroom? What happens in the living spaces? The entryway. And he works through how God interacted with his people in the Old Testament. A lot of his examples come from there. How the Israelites would have understood God's presence and how they would have responded in life and in habit and in both the ordinary and the extraordinary. And then he brings that into your home. And so for the mom who's building a home, who's trying to educate in this lovely classical way that brings in the transcendentals, that tries to speak to every part of the image bearer who walks into their house, this book has wonderful insights, and also it's just so beautifully written. It's another one that I think will turn into its own commonplace book, because there's just so much I want to pull from it. And I think it's a gift for moms to see things like the mundane, the cooking and the cleaning, the holiday hosting, which is coming up, the giving kids baths, cleaning them up, putting them in bed, tucking them in every night, how that actually is a gift into God's love and how it can communicate that to the people in your home. So those are my 4 books for you. I will link them down below, of course, so you can find them. We are talking books and other things all the time over in Patreon. I would love to have you. And then, of course, the podcast is about to wrap up season 2 with our final 20th principle, along with 2 more fun interviews. So find us in the links below. I will see you next time as we talk about How to Speak Charlotte Mason Volume 2. I'll see you then.